Hello students, welcome to Political Economy MOOC course. The topic for today's discussion is the approach to political economy, the Gandhian approach. Let us first begin by understanding how Gandhi envisaged state and politics. Gandhi did not set himself to the task of a systematic presentation of his views about the nature of political activity. His ideas were thrown up as comments on the given concrete reality and were intended to give shape to events and for the remaking of man as a moral person. It was therefore natural for him to be concerned more with the substance of things than with attributing labels to what he thought and for the realization of what he worked. Gandhi's ideas are therefore best understood in the context of his broader philosophy of life in general, which encompassed several principles like nonviolence, satyagraha, and involved a basic critique of the Western civilization. Gandhi had always believed that unless the spiritual aspect of civilization is addressed, it is no civilization at all. He did not consider modern civilization as true civilization, for civilization, according to him, did not consist in quantitative physical elements and achievements. It should rather be considered from a moral, religious, and ethical point of view. In the Hind Swaraj, for instance, he wrote, "The people of Europe today live in better built houses than they did 100 years ago. This is considered to be an emblem of civilization, and this is also a matter to promote bodily happiness. But there are now new kinds of diseases which stare us in the face and which people never dreamt before. This civilization seeks to increase bodily comforts and miserably fails even in doing so." So, in order to get the right perspective of the Gandhian philosophy, let us try and look at some of the basic elements of Gandhian thought. His views on politics and economics were premised on a number of basic convictions, all of which have an important bearing on his theory of state, on his understanding of economics, and his general perception of human society and civilization. Gandhi tended to view dharma as some kind of a universal morality to which the affairs of men and states ought to correspond. His concept of universal morality transcended the Hindu concept in the sense that he assimilated the Christian ethic, and the concept of fundamental morality which he projected was the best, a combination of the Hindu and the Christian traditions. He was considerably influenced by modern political traditions. He was an inheritor of the liberal tradition, of the tradition of philosophical anarchism, and of the tradition of collectivism that we come across in socialist thought. Elemental humanism is the essence of Gandhi's attitude to the state. And let us also remember that Gandhi was always a practitioner, and the role that he had to play as the supreme commander of the nation engaged in struggle against the mightiest state organization of the world at that time determined to a large extent his attitude towards the state power structure. But what comes out clearly all through the Gandhian philosophy is his entrenched opposition and in fact aversion to anything that even remotely reeked of violence. And that is why non-violence for Gandhi is a vital creed. He held that violence was evil, for violence includes not only physical coercion, but also economic and social coercion. The power of physical coercion belongs to the state. In the modern absolutist state, there is no limit to the extent to which this power is used. The power of the state to coerce is a kind of organized violence in which lies the essence of the modern state. As Gandhi himself remarked, "I look upon an increase in the power of the state with the greatest fear, since although while apparently doing good by minimizing exploitation, it does the greatest harm to mankind by destroying individuality." The state represents violence in a concentrated and organized form. The individual has a soul, but Gandhi kept referring to the state as some kind of a soulless machine, and it can never be weaned from violence to which it owes its very existence. He thus clarified, what I disapprove of is any organization based on force, and the state is definitely an embodiment of such violence. So Gandhi's disdain for the state is basically premised on his larger aversion to any kind of violence. As one who believed in the sanctity of the individual and for whom nonviolence was a fundamental creed, it was but natural that he would characterize the state in such a manner. Like Marx, in fact, Gandhi envisages the withering away of the state, the final stage of man's journey towards perfection. In fact, he refers to a state of some kind of enlightened anarchy where everyone is his own ruler. As Gandhi points out, in the final state, therefore, there is no political power since there is no state. In fact, he says that in his ideal polity, man would be so innately self-disciplined that there would be absolutely no need for governance or state. He rejects the statist collectivist implication of Marxism. As he posed the question, if the individual ceases to count, what is left of society? Ultimately, it is the individual which is the unit. This concept of the ultimate authority of the individual logically paved the way for the enunciation of the theory of non-violent non-cooperation with the state. You will find that Gandhi is not only averse to any kind of state, he has also the strongest criticism against the Euro-American democracies of the West, which he keeps referring to as pseudo-democracies. So what exactly did Gandhi mean by a democracy? He says the Euro-American democracies were not qualitatively different from those states which tore off their outer democratic facade. As he himself put it, the democracies that we see at work in England, America, and France are only so-called because they are no less based on violence than Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, or even Soviet Russia. Because in all these totalitarian systems, the individual is totally eclipsed, and that is what Gandhi was completely against. His indictment of Western democracies was based on three fundamental reasons. One, exploitation of the weak by a few capitalist owners. Two, expansion of capitalism resulting in exploitation of weaker people. And white racialism. So Gandhi's notion of democracy is that under it, the weakest should have the same opportunity as the strongest. This definitely carries with it an echo of the basic liberal creed, which tries to justify that although human beings are very different, they may be born in different circumstances, but when it comes to extension of opportunities for qualitative improvement of life's potentials for self-realization, then definitely there should be no discrimination. And that is why Gandhi's humanism also is an important component that we have to keep in mind in understanding the approach. In Gandhi's concept of the state, or in his understanding of politics in general, two elements stand out in great prominence, and we will take a look at these. First, there is no superior-inferior stratification as is seen in Hindu conservative thought. He repudiates any such distorted notion of superiority or inferiority, for he believed that all groups are equal and none is smaller or greater than the other. The other important element is that Gandhi, by drawing a neat distinction between state and society, refused to grant the state any kind of supra-personality. He prizes individual liberty more than anything else, but he insisted that it must not grow despotic. As Gandhi says, unrestrained individualism is the law of the beast of the jungle. We have learned to strike the golden mean between individual freedom and social restraint. willing submission to social restraint for the sake of the well-being of the whole society enriches both the individual and the society of which one is a member. We will be reiterating this even subsequently, but try and understand from the very beginning how important it is for Gandhi never to abandon the ethical element of life. We will see that decentralization of power is the core of the Gandhian polity, because he was always conscious that the individual should always be allowed to bloom and grow, and that he should not come under the heavy hand of any kind of exploitation or anything that might dwarf his individuality, which is why he was also repelled by any kind of stratification in society between the high and the low. For Gandhi, centralized political and economic order and individual liberty and non-violence are incompatible. He thus advocated dispersal of power over as wide an area as possible. In fact, that is why we insist that decentralization of power is the core of the Gandhian polity. So what kind of a society does Gandhi envisage? He envisions a simple society where power is pulverized and decentralized such that it can never be abused to overwhelm the individual, and which is free from the blemish of what Louis Mumford calls giantism. Self-governing village panchayats constitute the most important units of Gandhi's envisioned polity. Territorial decentralization is combined with technological decentralization. Favoring the creation of autonomous village communities, Gandhi records, and I quote, "In this structure composed of innumerable villages, life will not be a pyramid with the apex sustained by the bottom, but it will be an oceanic circle whose center will be the individual, always ready to perish for the village, the latter ready to perish for the circle of villages, till at last the whole becomes one life composed of individuals. The outermost circumference will not wield power to crush the inner circle, but it will give strength to all within and derive its own strength from it." The question arises, is Gandhi such a staunch advocate of decentralization? He asserted that such a decentralized society, the individual shall enjoy complete freedom. Such a society shall not be violent in nature, and there shall be no place for the police, military, and the courts of law, which we looked upon essentially as apparatuses of coercion. This decentralization would also bring about regulation of the use of machinery. He thus pleads for the use of simple tools, although in a practical way he does make allowance for the use of heavy machinery in case of works of public utility which cannot be undertaken by human labor. But Gandhi was always a believer in village-based cottage industries which could absorb the huge workforce of India. And he was definitely averse to a capitalist society, at least the way the world has witnessed thus far. He believed that the modern capitalist society was patently inegalitarian and exploitative. The socialist answer to this exploitative order is the liquidation of capitalism and the takeover of capital and the means of production by the state through a proletarian revolution. This is especially the approach of the Marxist-Leninists who ushered in socialism in Russia in 1917. If you are familiar with Marxist lexicon, you will know that Marx believed in the concept of a dictatorship of the proletariat which follows a capitalist society through a socialist revolution. And in this dictatorship, of course, this is an intermediate stage. It is one where no kind of liberty or rights are extended to the people as such, because it is feared by the nascent socialist state that they may be used to the advantage of the capitalists who have been defeated but not completely obliterated. And that is why, to protect the nascent socialist state, this kind of a dictatorship of the proletariat is inaugurated. Gandhi was repelled by any such concept of a dictatorship. Following the Second World War, several other East European countries like Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, and Romania also were seen to turn to the Soviet model of socialism. However, these nations have admitted the failure of socialism and have reverted to what has come to be called a market economy, which is basically a euphemistic expression for capitalism. So the socialists of yesteryears are again helplessly caught in the coils of exploitative capitalism. And that is why Gandhi was also averse to a capitalist society. And as a corrective, okay, because he always believed that one should hate crime but not the criminal. So there was nothing innately offensive about the capitalists. Gandhi would like to implore to the softening dictates of the hearts of the capitalists to ensure that the wealth which is at their disposal be channelized for the welfare of the community at large. So this kind of sense of moral and social responsibility lies at the heart of what he called the concept of trusteeship. So what is his concept of trusteeship basically about? Gandhi always doubted the efficacy of the socialist answer to the perils of capitalism. On the other hand, he believed that the capitalist order could be converted into an egalitarian, non-exploitative economic order without having to liquidate or forcibly expropriate the individual capitalists. To this end, Gandhi propounded his novel concept of trusteeship. The theory rests on the assumption that the wealthy people should voluntarily renounce or set apart their superfluous wealth for the use of the larger community, in other words, keep it in trust for society. What are the major underpinnings of this new concept of trusteeship that Gandhi introduced as a corrective to the defects of both capitalism and socialism? Gandhi arrived at his theory of trusteeship through the study of the Gita and Snell's principles of equity. I told you at the very outset that to understand Gandhi's views about politics, society, or economics, we must try and contextualize it in the context of his larger philosophy of life. And Gandhi therefore believed that all forms of property or human accomplishments are either gifts of nature or products of social living. As such, they belong not to the individual but to the society and should therefore be used for the good of all. Every person should look upon the physical or material talents as a trust for society and use them for the benefit of society at large. This constructive trusteeship is not optional, it is obligatory. Nor is trusteeship a permanent tenure for holding property in trust for another. It is a transitory status leading to cooperativization of large-scale property. The transference from private ownership to trust ownership does not give rise to any claims for compensation. The theory of trusteeship also does not contemplate the liquidation or pauperization of the capitalists. It gives them a genuine opportunity to use their experience and talents for the common good. So economic equality, Gandhi held, is the master key to a non-exploitative socio-economic order which he was in the quest for. According to him, absolute economic equality could be reached only in a perfect society, which of course is an abstraction. Therefore, he held, I quote, "My ideal is equal distribution, but so far as I can see, it cannot be realized. I therefore work for equitable distribution." Working for this goal means bridging the gulf between the rich and the poor, between the capitalists and labor, and between the propertied and dispossessed sections of society. To this end, Gandhi offered his concept of trusteeship. According to this theory, it is not necessary that the rich men be deprived of their superfluous wealth. The rich man will be left in possession of their wealth. Of what he will use will be left to his reason, and he will therefore act as a trustee for the remainder to be used for the benefit of society. But you see, there are difficulties associated with trusteeship. It may be argued that the theory of trusteeship puts the capitalist in a most advantageous position, while it apparently leaves the rest of the community to depend on his goodwill or mercy. For what are the people to do if the capitalist trustee does not live up to his obligation? Do we have any sanction? Gandhi prescribes non-violent non-cooperation as the sanction or remedy against a trustee who betrays his trust. Moreover, Gandhi felt that trusteeship should generally succeed because he believed in the godliness in human nature, or the preponderance of the virtues of love, cooperation, and helpfulness in the nature of man. Gandhi therefore felt convinced that normally the trustees would carry out their trust, and in exceptional situations they could be made to see reason and fulfill their social obligations through the means of mass non-violent non-cooperation. So what are the main arguments in Gandhi's concept of trusteeship? Trusteeship provides a means of transforming the present capitalist order of society into an egalitarian one. Remember, he was particularly haunted by the tremendous inequality that is part and parcel of any capitalist society. Therefore, trusteeship gives no quarter to capitalism, but provides the owning class with a chance of reforming itself. It is based on the faith that human nature is never beyond redemption. Trusteeship does not recognize any right of private ownership of property, except inasmuch as it may be permitted for the welfare of society. Trusteeship does not exclude legislative regulation of the ownership and use of wealth. Under state-regulated trusteeship, an individual will not be free to hold or use his wealth for his selfish satisfaction or in complete disregard of the interests of society. Just as it is proposed to fix a decent minimum living wage, even so, a limit should be fixed for the maximum income that be allowed to any person in society. Trusteeship is also a means for remedying the recurrent inequalities that are inevitable in nature, not an excuse for creating inequalities artificially to be able to play at trusteeship. That would be a travesty of the real meaning and purpose. Hence, trusteeship should not be a cloak for any kind of imperialism whereby one nation may claim to be a trustee of another and in that pretext dominate it. We clearly see in Gandhi more faith reposed in the individual than in the state. It may be pointed out that after all, trusteeship is state regulated. It would therefore be better if property is put straightaway under the ownership of the state, without bringing in private individuals as trustees or intermediaries. To this, Gandhi replied that violence and the possibilities of the misuse of power on the part of the individual should always be preferred to the violence and misuse of power by the state as a lesser evil. As Gandhi writes, I quote, "It is my firm conviction that if the state suppresses capitalism by force or violence, it will be caught in the coils of violence itself. The individual has the soul, but as the state is a soulless machine, it can never be weaned from violence to which it owes its very existence. What I would personally prefer would be not centralization of power in the hands of the state, but an extension of the sense of trusteeship by individual owners." So Gandhi, as I said, was appealing more and more to the softening dictates of the hearts of the capitalists. And he was convinced that trusteeship would be a new magic wand that could bring to an end various problems plaguing across the world, be it in socialist or in capitalist societies. He wished that trusteeship should become India's gift to the world, for it provides a means of peacefully transforming the capitalist order of society into an egalitarian one. Gandhi had, I have already clarified in reference to the notion of the dictatorship of the proletariat, that he rejected the Marxist solution to the problem of economic relations because he considered it to be based on violence and tyranny. He also rejected the Western solution because he considered the Western political-economic system to be based on exploitation, competition, and conflict. In any case, Western civilization, of which Gandhi was an ardent critic, according to him, was one that was basically underlined too much on the material aspects of life and on greed. Gandhi sought to harmonize the economic relations and to consolidate the ultimate values into a state of equilibrium through what he calls trusteeship, a programmatic construction which is closely connected with the anarchist concept of mutual benefit. The institution of trusteeship is therefore regarded by Gandhi as some kind of a compromise between private enterprise and state-controlled enterprise. This compromise seems to be underlined by a distinction between legal and moral ownership. Legally, wealth belongs to the owner, morally it belongs to the whole of society. And that is why Gandhi often said that trusteeship means the joint trusteeship of the capitalists and laborers over the wealth of society. So what are the apprehensions about trusteeship? Not only his critics but also his co-workers expressed doubt about the efficacy of establishing a system of trusteeship. Nehru wrote in his autobiography, "It is unreasonable to believe in the theory of trusteeship and to give unchecked power and wealth to an individual and expect him to use it for the public good entirely." G.D. Birla, a renowned capitalist and a close associate of Gandhi at that time, who interacted with several wealthy people in the context of Gandhi's notion of trusteeship, ultimately wrote to Gandhi, "I must confess that I was terribly disillusioned in my expectation. Everybody wants to evade it if possible." Even so, there seems to be nothing impossible about the idea of trusteeship. In a nebulous form, the idea is implicit in present-day parliamentary democracy, where elected leaders hold themselves as trustees of the nation's interests and resources. Don't we repose all our faith, all our hope, all our aspirations in those leaders who claim to lead the nation and who are in control of the country's resources? So are they not basically trustees acting for our interests? Gandhi was a practical idealist, and he was aware that the ideal of trusteeship might never materialize in its fullness. But then he would raise the question as to which other ideal can be or has been fully attained: democracy, socialism, or human rights. So Gandhi's idea of trusteeship is pregnant with great results. He thus writes, "Absolute trusteeship is like an abstraction, almost like Euclid's definition of a point, and it is equally unattainable. But if we strive for it, we should be able to go further in realizing a greater state of equality on earth than by any other method." With capitalism always in crisis, and with the present large-scale breakdown of the edifice of socialism, Gandhi's theory of trusteeship may well become the new rallying point in the quest for an egalitarian and a non-exploitative order. What is important to appreciate in understanding the Gandhian approach is that it was essentially eclectic. The solutions he offered for the alleviation of the economic ills that imperialism exploited India suffered did not derive from any rigid doctrinaire approach. The remedies he suggested came out of his experience with the growing realities of life around him. Gandhi's economic ideas were primarily rooted in necessity that grew out of the social soil of India. His economic ideas were therefore suffused with the principles of the ultimate truth as he saw it. In that sense, his ideas lay not only in the economic and the social spheres, but were closely integrated with his philosophy of life. It was basically what may be dubbed as meta-economics. And what is remarkable is that he never separated economics and ethics. To Gandhi, economics and ethics were not separate entities. I must confess, he wrote, that I do not draw a sharp or any distinction between economics and ethics. Economics that hurt the moral well-being of an individual or of a nation are immoral and therefore sinful. His economic ideas have therefore to be read in the context of his attitude to modern civilization as it appeared to Gandhi, which modern civilization he felt was based entirely on greed and exploitation, and that is why he invoked this moral concern. Looking at the Gandhian trusteeship more closely, we might ask what it actually means to be a trustee. One who is self-consciously assumes responsibility for upholding, protecting, and putting to good use whatever he possesses, acquires, or earns. For an individual to be a trustee in any meaningful sense implies he is both self-governing and morally sensitive. He is acutely aware of the unmet needs of others and simultaneously is capable of controlling and transmuting his own appropriating tendencies. Therefore, the best trustee is someone who has attained an inward moral balance. Therefore, in conclusion, friends, it is important to understand and accept that Gandhi's concept of state and society is basically a non-violent one, premised on a basic faith in spiritual democracy, which emphasizes duties rather than rights, and which harps on the decentralization of authority. He pinned his faith in the technique of satyagraha for checking any tendency towards an overgrowth of power. True, Gandhi's dream cannot be transformed into reality, but he did envision a future which transcends the present to become a reality someday. The urge behind this vision can hardly be ignored, and herein lies the appeal of Gandhi's vision. Thank you.